Mirna Salihin, whom we will refer to as Mirna throughout this story, came into the world. Her family was doubly blessed on March 30th, 1988. She arrived alongside her twin sister Sandy. Both were born in Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia, into a family of excellent economic standing. The household was led by their father, Edi Darmawan Salihin, and his wife, Netu Sianti. They resided on the island of Java, one of the 17,000 islands that make up the Republic of Indonesia. Jakarta, not only the capital but also the most populous city in the country, is in fact considered one of the largest cities in the world. In that thriving city, Edi was a successful businessman. According to the sources consulted, he owned a company operating in the shipping sector, particularly handling important documents, and another company focused on manufacturing. The references to the twins emphasize that they had a joyful childhood. Mirna, in particular, was always a cheerful girl with a natural gift for getting along with others. In contrast, she possessed a strong character and wasn't afraid to express her opinions in any conversation. This temperament made her very active. She loved sports, especially soccer, but she also showed a great inclination towards design from a young age. The girls attended high school at Jubilee School in Jakarta, a prestigious institution offering a dual and bilingual curriculum in both Indonesian and English, including preparation for the Cambridge International exams. After finishing high school, Mirna decided to follow her heart and pursue her passion. At that time, she had a boyfriend named Eri Soemarko, around whom little is known, as there has been a significant level of secrecy regarding his previous life. What is certain is that both Mirna and Eri decided to move to Australia to pursue higher education, staying relatively close to each other, although they lived in different cities. According to their plan, Mirna began her studies in graphic design at the Billy Blue School of Design in Sydney, one of the most prestigious institutions in the country, while Eri settled in Melbourne. As a sociable young woman, it didn't take long for Mirna to start making friends at her university. Among her new acquaintances was Jessica Kumala Wo, another Indonesian student of the same age. Jessica was born just a couple of months before Mirna, on January 5, 1988, although other sources claim she was born on October 9th of the same year. She was the youngest in her family, which was led by her parents, Winardi and Imelda. Jessica's family, like Mirna's, came from a very affluent background. Sources suggest that Winardi ran a substantial plastic import empire in Indonesia, and he was even known as the King of Plastic. However, an interview with Jessica's mother, Imelda, provides a different perspective, as she claimed that her husband was more of a trusted employee rather than the owner of the company. Regardless, the family's wealth was undeniable. While the family moved to Australia in 2005 due to Winardi's business interests, Jessica initially stayed in Jakarta, only joining her family in Australia after completing her high school education. Once in Australia, Jessica enrolled in the same graphic design program at Billy Blue as Mirna, and their paths crossed. The two young women quickly bonded, sharing many common interests. However, despite their similarities, their emotional backgrounds were vastly different. While Mirna came from a close-knit family, Jessica's family life was not as harmonious. Over the next few years, Mirna and Jessica, along with two other friends, Han and Vera, formed a tight-knit group. They were quite selective about who they allowed into their circle, offering each other affection and protection. This group became inseparable, often referred to as the Four Musketeers, studying together, sharing assignments, and enjoying their leisure time. During this period, Mirna also seized every opportunity to meet with her boyfriend, Eri, maintaining their relationship despite the distance. However, after graduation, as often happens, things began to change. Mirna decided to return to Indonesia with Eri, choosing not to seek immediate employment but instead to reintegrate socially in her home country. Soon after, the couple formalized their engagement and began making wedding plans, while Jessica remained in Australia, where she had become a permanent resident. Australia became not only Jessica's home but also her family's after they too settled in the country. However, a reunion with Mirna in June 2015 did not go as expected. Mirna decided to take a vacation to Sydney to reconnect with her university friends and relive the joy of her student days in the city. Naturally, she reached out to Jessica, and the two planned to meet for dinner. Their conversation quickly turned to catching up on each other's lives since graduation and Mirna's return to Jakarta. Mirna shared her excitement about her engagement and the early stages of wedding planning, emphasizing how peaceful and fulfilling her life had become. Jessica, on the other hand, revealed that after graduation, she had secured a job as a designer with the New South Wales Ambulance Service. However, she also confided that her relationship with her boyfriend was troubled, mentioning issues with alcohol and even drug use. Mirna, known for her straightforwardness, particularly with friends, advised Jessica to end the relationship, arguing that she was wasting her time with someone who wasn't good for her. She even added a remark meant to uplift Jessica, insisting that she deserved someone much better. Jessica listened quietly to Mirna's passionate advice, but it became clear that this wasn't the response she had hoped for when she shared her situation. Once Mirna finished her speech, Jessica abruptly stood up, leaving the table without finishing her meal and offering only a cursory goodbye. Mirna was left bewildered by her friend's reaction. She hadn't intended to offend or criticize Jessica, but something in Jessica's demeanor as she left deeply unsettled Mirna. She couldn't quite pinpoint the reason, but a sense of fear lingered within her. Upon returning to Jakarta, Mirna confided in Ari that she no longer felt comfortable meeting Jessica alone and would prefer to have someone else accompany her if they were to meet again. Fortunately, new and exciting prospects soon occupied her mind, particularly the wedding preparations. Mirna was fully engrossed in ensuring that every detail of the ceremony and celebration would be perfect and unforgettable. During one discussion about the guest list, Mirna mentioned to Ari that she did not want to invite Jessica. The unsettling feeling from their last encounter still haunted her, and she was determined that nothing should ruin or overshadow the happiness of her special day. It's worth noting that the other two friends from their close-knit group, Han and Vera, both of whom Mirna had met through Jessica, were indeed invited to the wedding celebration. The ideal wedding Mirna envisioned needed the perfect setting, and she was committed to making that vision a reality. Mirna and Ari's wedding took place in a luxurious setting on the fabulous island of Bali, known worldwide not only for its extraordinary beaches but also for its landscape that blends rice fields, mountains, and volcanoes, all enriched by ancient traditions. The wedding was simply perfect from every point of view, and since they also wanted their honeymoon to be ideal, they decided to postpone it until April 2016, when they would travel to Korea. While Mirna's dreams were coming true, Jessica's seemed to have turned into nightmares. Although the details became known later, her life was beginning to resemble a small hell. Jessica lived alone in an apartment in Western Sydney, and particularly in 2015, the year she reunited with Mirna, she made several attempts to self-harm and even end her life. Some of these incidents were reported to the authorities, and in several cases, her boyfriend, a young man named Patrick O'Connor, was allegedly involved. The chain of events began in late January 2015, or at least that was the first time Patrick called emergency services, claiming that his girlfriend had a knife and was threatening to harm herself. As a result, Jessica was hospitalized 5 times throughout that year. In August 2015, Australian media outlets showed images of an accident in which Jessica crashed her car, a sports Audi, into a nursing home, completely destroying a brick wall and coming within a few meters of the residents' rooms. Fortunately, none of the residents were injured, but Jessica wasn't as lucky. Although, considering the impact, she survived with just a couple of broken ribs and several bruises. It was later confirmed that she had been driving under the influence of alcohol. From then on, more calls were made by Patrick, seeking help from emergency services due to Jessica's repeated attempts to take her own life. On many of these occasions, she was under severe alcohol intoxication. The situation escalated to the point where Patrick began to fear for his safety, as it appeared that he had ended the relationship, but Jessica wouldn't accept it and sent him all kinds of threatening messages. To avoid further complications, Patrick requested a restraining order against his ex-girlfriend. During those same days, he received another court summons, but this time not for Jessica's harassment, but for the previous crash at the nursing home. Jessica was scheduled to appear in court in mid-February 2016 to face charges of reckless driving under the influence of alcohol. And in the midst of the whirlwind that turned her world upside down, mostly due to her own actions, Jessica was asked to leave her job, although she claimed she had resigned from the position. Perhaps in an attempt to reconnect with her happier past, in early December 2015, Jessica created a chat group to communicate with her college friends and announced that she would be returning to Jakarta in a few days, hoping to meet up with them. Of course, Mirna was in that group. According to some sources, Mirna did not immediately respond to the invitations, but at Jessica's insistence, they finally organized a dinner reunion on December 12th. Mirna would not attend alone but with her husband. There are no further details about that meeting, except that it was that night when Jessica learned that her friend had gotten married. By early January 2016, Jessica was once again planning an outing with her group of friends, as they had all returned to Jakarta. After some chatting back and forth, Jessica invited Mirna, Han, and Vera to meet her on Wednesday, January 6th, at the luxurious Olivier Cafe restaurant located in the Grand Indonesia shopping center. This was a typical spot for chic people to enjoy and be seen. They agreed to meet around 5 p.m., and all of them confirmed their attendance. Earlier that day, Jessica even asked her friends in the chat group what they would like to drink, as she planned to arrive a bit earlier to have everything ready. In fact, on the day of the meeting, Jessica arrived at the venue much earlier, around 3:30 in the afternoon. She walked around the place and left, only to return about 45 minutes later, carrying 3 large gift bags containing bottles of liquid soap that she had bought as gifts for her friends. Once inside the establishment, she chose a table more than 40 minutes before the scheduled time. She decided to go ahead with the orders placed by the girls via chat, asking for a Vietnamese iced coffee for Mirna and 2 cocktails, which she paid for immediately. Shortly after, the drinks were served at the table. A little later than expected, around 5:15, Mirna and Han arrived at the cafe, and after some warm greetings, the friends sat down to enjoy what was supposed to be a pleasant afternoon of conversation. However, within minutes, the scene took a dramatic turn. Mirna took a sip of the Vietnamese iced coffee she had ordered and was met with an unpleasant surprise. Instead of the delicious taste she expected, she found the coffee smelled and tasted horrible. To confirm it wasn't just her imagination, she offered the coffee to her friends. Jessica sniffed it but refused to taste it, while Han dipped the tip of her straw in and agreed that the drink was not what Mirna had ordered. The taste was so unpleasant that it even seemed spicy. Within seconds, things took a turn for the worse. There wasn't even time to call the waiter to explain what had happened or ask for a replacement drink, as Mirna suddenly began to feel sick. She threw her head back, and her body started convulsing. Mirna's body began to convulse violently as foam started to come out of her mouth, and she eventually collapsed. The girls screamed in panic, trying to understand what was happening to Mirna and attempting to revive her. The staff of the establishment quickly rushed to the table to see what was going on. The waiters wanted to know what had happened, and the girls explained that their friend had taken a sip of the Vietnamese coffee and suddenly felt ill. Jessica even asked one of the workers what they had put in the coffee. One of the friends, Arif, was immediately called, and she rushed to the venue, arriving around the same time as the emergency service personnel who had also been notified. After performing some resuscitation maneuvers, the medical team transported the unconscious Mirna to the hospital. Despite the best efforts of the hospital's emergency staff, they were unable to revive her, and Mirna was pronounced dead at 6:30 p.m. that evening. The doctors were baffled by what had happened, as they couldn't find any reason to justify the sudden death of a perfectly healthy 27-year-old woman after taking a sip of coffee, no matter how bad it tasted. Meanwhile, Jessica, who had questioned the staff about what they had put in her friend's coffee, caught the attention of the store manager. The manager spoke with everyone involved in preparing the drinks, and each one assured that they had only followed the usual procedures for making the requested beverages. The manager decided to take precautionary measures by collecting the glasses that still contained the drinks ordered by Jessica. She placed them in airtight plastic bags to isolate them from everything else, in case an investigation was conducted. While handling this process, both the manager and her staff noticed something peculiar. The color of the iced coffee had changed from its typical dark brown to a lighter, amber-like shade, and it emitted a nauseating odor. The truth is that as soon as the authorities became aware of the strange incident in which a perfectly healthy young woman lost her life after taking just one sip of coffee, and upon learning that Mirna was from a well-known and wealthy family, they almost immediately opened an investigation to uncover what had led to such a terrible and unexpected outcome. The first step was to conduct toxicological tests on various samples from the body, including bile, urine, and gastric fluids. However, these initial analyses, carried out about an hour after her death, did not provide any relevant information. The next step was to consider an autopsy, but in a country where the predominant religion is Islam, this procedure is not standard practice. Even in criminal cases, family authorization is required to perform such an examination. While Mirna's father was willing to give his consent, believing it was crucial to discover what had happened to his daughter, Mirna's mother was strongly opposed to the idea of such an invasive procedure. In the end, a compromise was reached. The family allowed samples of Mirna's tissues to be taken, but did not authorize a full autopsy. Around the same time, the authorities visited the Olivier Cafe restaurant and collected the drinks that the manager had sealed for safekeeping. 3 days after the incident, the results of both the tests on Mirna's stomach and the analysis of the drinks were revealed. Mirna's stomach showed lesions consistent with the ingestion of a corrosive liquid, and a small amount of cyanide was also found, something that had not appeared in the toxicological tests conducted on the day of her death. The Vietnamese coffee, however, showed a significant presence of the poisonous chemical. It's worth noting that the odor of cyanide is often described as a strong aroma of bitter almonds, but scientifically, it has been proven that the ability to detect this scent is related to the X chromosome, and the concentration necessary to perceive the aroma is very close to the point at which ingestion becomes toxic. On that basis, everything seemed to indicate that the amount of the substance in the drink was significant. From that moment on, all efforts were directed towards discovering who had contaminated Mirna's drink with the lethal toxic substance. To achieve this, the authorities began interviewing everyone involved in one way or another in the events. They also requested the recordings from the security cameras at the scene of the alleged crime in order to thoroughly analyze what had happened that evening. While these procedures were underway, Mirna's family, husband, and friends had to face the terrible reality of saying goodbye to the young, bright, cheerful newlywed, full of dreams. Her unexpected death left behind a grief-stricken family, heartbroken parents, a twin sister who had lost her other half, and a young widower who would never get to enjoy the life they had planned together for so many years, including the honeymoon they had postponed until April, thinking they had all the time in the world. Jessica attended the funeral ceremonies, although those in attendance noted that she appeared uncomfortable. According to some reports, she left the service hastily after one of Mirna's aunts accused her of having poisoned her. As the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A detailed review of the security camera footage from Olivier Cafe revealed several elements of great interest to the investigation. The recording showed Jessica arriving at the establishment about 90 minutes before the scheduled time of the meeting. It captured her not only entering the premises but also walking around the surrounding area, as if she were making a reconnaissance of the place. Particularly telling was how she inspected everything, especially looking upwards in a gesture that seemed aimed at identifying the location of the site's security cameras. A couple of minutes later she left, and it was then that she visited a nearby store, where she purchased 3 bottles of liquid soap as gifts for her friends, placing them in large bags. Jessica was recorded again on the security tapes when she re-entered the cafe restaurant around 4:15 p.m. At that point, she began looking for a place to sit and wait for her friends. The footage clearly showed Jessica watching the security camera in front of her and placing the gift bags on table 54 of the restaurant, which had another security device behind it. However, the plants bordering the table obstructed the view of what happened next. The woman sat down right behind the gift bags and seemed to make sure her hands were hidden by them. A few minutes later, she went to the bar, leaving the bags on the table, claiming that she only intended to reserve the spot to prevent others from occupying it. She ordered 3 drinks, including the aromatic infusion that Mirna had mentioned she loved. Once the waiter delivered the drinks and left, Jessica returned to her seat behind the bags, which she used to cover the drinks. It appeared that Jessica was manipulating the drinks, perhaps adding sugar or stirring something, even though the drinks were already prepared and ready to serve. At a certain point, she seemed to finish her actions and move to one of the seats at the end of the table, leaving Mirna's coffee right in the center. At 5:15 p.m., when Mirna and Hannah arrived, the drinks had been on the table for over 45 minutes. After greeting their friend and taking their seats, Mirna sat in the center position where her iced Vietnamese coffee was placed. The footage captured the commotion that followed when Mirna, after taking a sip of the coffee, reacted negatively, fanning her face, and ultimately fainted into her seat. Hannah's reaction was immediate. She tried to help her friend, and other staff members from the cafe joined in, responding to Hannah's cries for help. Jessica, however, stood by as a bystander, showing minimal curiosity about what was happening, but not making any effort to assist her friend. Amid the chaos, no one considered that the incident might have been intentional. 3 weeks after Mirna's death, following the analysis of samples and detailed scrutiny of the security camera footage, Jessica was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. The investigation revealed that the amount of cyanide in Mirna's drink was significant, leading to Jessica's arrest for her role in the crime. Jessica was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. When asked to surrender the clothes she wore on the day of the incident, she claimed she had discarded her pants because they had been torn during the commotion at the restaurant and the subsequent transfer of her friend to the hospital. Consequently, the garment could not be recovered to verify her account or test for any traces of the poison. Investigators also faced difficulties in determining how Jessica obtained the cyanide. However, in Jakarta, as in many places worldwide, those with means can often find ways to acquire forbidden substances. The case of the young and affluent Mirna had captured significant media attention, with coverage spanning newspapers and audiovisual media. Interviews were conducted with both the families involved and Jessica, who consistently expressed her confusion over the suspicions against her, maintaining her innocence and claiming ignorance regarding the cause of Mirna's death. Jessica appeared remarkably calm and emotionally detached throughout the ordeal, despite the gravity of the situation. Over the following months, the case continued to attract widespread public and media scrutiny. On February 7th, during the reconstruction of the events, the media broadcast images of Jessica's participation, which turned out to be a lengthy process. Jessica underwent a 12-hour reenactment, with 2 versions of the events being staged, one based on her statements and the other according to the investigation's findings, as revealed by the security camera footage. Notably, Jessica only participated in reenacting her version of the events. Her lawyer claimed that she never requested the cafe staff to reveal what Mirna's coffee had been mixed with, and that the placement of the gift bags on the table was merely to reserve the spot while she went to the bar to order the drinks. When she went to the bar to order the drinks, the detainee's legal representative questioned the second reconstruction, arguing that it was based on security camera footage that, according to him, they had not seen. This argument seemed illogical to some media outlets, which highlighted that the camera footage should match the reconstructions. One of the objectives of the reconstruction was to verify the reaction of the aromatic infusion, both in its natural state and after being contaminated with cyanide. Samples of the coffee that had been carefully preserved by the restaurant manager were used. In one round of tests, cyanide was added to the coffee without stirring it, and then the same tests were repeated while stirring the liquid. The results would be compared with the actual coffee from the case, which had been kept in the police laboratories. The detainee, who had undergone at least 3 lengthy interrogations and consistently denied any involvement in the crime, maintained a calm and impassive demeanor throughout the process. She never attempted to hide her face from the numerous journalists and cameras observing her in such a compromising situation. Amidst all this, a question haunted the minds of Mirna's family and friends, as well as investigators and the public: why would Jessica want to end her friend's life? Several hypotheses were proposed, including that Jessica was the only one in her close group of friends who had not been invited to the wedding, or that it might have been a case of extreme jealousy, since Mirna had become closer to Han and Vera, who were once close friends with Jessica. There were also sensationalist theories about a supposed love triangle, given that it seems Jessica had mentioned in Australia that Arav had been her partner in the past. The speculation that circulated was that the real mastermind behind the act was none other than Mirna's husband, Arav. It was alleged that Arav had paid the waiter to poison his wife's drink in order to collect the life insurance money. Jessica attempted to shift suspicion away from herself and onto the young widower, but both Arav and the store clerk denied any such claims, and investigators were unable to prove this theory. Another unsubstantiated rumor suggested that the motive might have been jealousy, possibly related to a rumored lesbian relationship between Jessica and Mirna, and Jessica's inability to accept Mirna's marriage to Arif. However, these theories appeared to be mere sensationalist speculations propagated by the press. For the authorities, understanding the detainee's background and uncovering a potential motive was crucial. Consequently, a team of investigators traveled to Australia to delve into Jessica's past. They interviewed her former employers, revealing the first of Jessica's lies. Although Jessica had claimed she had resigned from her job at the ambulance company, her former boss reported that she had actually been terminated. The manager described Jessica as having an unstable personality, noting that she could be friendly and even sweet at one moment and threatening the next. The manager recounted an incident in which Jessica told her supervisor that she and her mother needed to die. Moreover, Jessica had been involved in an accident where she crashed her car into a nursing home building. She displayed no remorse for the incident and, while under the influence of alcohol, showed no regret for her actions. During another visit to the hospital after one of her attempts to take her own life, she expressed a desire to leave the facility because she felt she was being treated unfairly, as if she had attempted to harm someone. In a concerning statement, Jessica mentioned that if she wanted to get rid of someone, she would know exactly how much poison to use. When asked if she believed she could be a real threat, her response raised further alarms. The suspect could pose a significant threat to another person's life, as affirmed by the woman. This assertion bolstered the authorities' conviction that the young woman should undergo a mental health evaluation conducted by specialists. The evaluation, which was promptly ordered, revealed that Jessica was intelligent, calm, and self-assured, but also exhibited narcissistic tendencies. These traits, while not indicative of a mental illness, suggested a propensity for seeking constant attention and could entail manipulative and deceitful behavior, alongside a lack of remorse when pursuing her desires. It took several months of rigorous effort by the investigative team to compile a case that the prosecution deemed robust enough to bring Jessica to trial. Despite the prosecutor's strenuous efforts, the document was repeatedly returned to the investigators due to insufficient evidence. Ultimately, justice would have the final say. On June 16, 2016, 6 months after the crime, the trial against Jessica Wo commenced at the Central State Court in Jakarta. The trial captivated public attention to an extent reminiscent of the O.J. Simpson case in the United States. The courtroom was overcrowded, with national and international media occupying every available space. The multitude of television cameras, competing to capture the most compelling footage, almost congested the courtroom. The trial was broadcast live for extended periods, which was unsurprising given its dramatic elements. The principal figures were two upper-class young women from prominent families, and the setting was one of the most prestigious locations in the capital. The apparent motive, which intrigued many, added to the trial's soap opera-like allure. Jessica faced charges of premeditated murder, which could result in a minimum sentence of 20 years imprisonment, with the possibility of life imprisonment or even the death penalty. However, the latter was virtually ruled out, as the Australian government, staunchly opposed to capital punishment, agreed to provide information about the defendant's life and legal history in exchange for the prosecution's assurance that she would not receive the death penalty. The prosecution had committed to ensuring that the death penalty would not be an option if Jessica was found guilty. However, some local media reports indicated that the three judges, who according to Indonesian legal protocol held the final decision, were not bound by this commitment. The prosecution's initial argument was that the defendant had decided to eliminate her friend out of spite, feeling wronged and insulted when Mirna had urged her to leave a boyfriend she described as abusive and nearly worthless. The defense, on the other hand, contended that Jessica was entirely innocent and deemed the prosecution's motive as insufficient and even ludicrous. Over the months, numerous witnesses took the stand to provide testimony on the case. Among them, Mirna's father, Eddie, recounted the peculiar behavior of the accused at the hospital on the day of the incident. Despite having just witnessed her friend's death, Jessica remained unnervingly calm, in stark contrast to Han, who was visibly in shock and weeping almost continuously. Han also testified that when Mirna was declared dead at the hospital, he heard Jessica say, "I'm sorry," which he found disconcerting. Eddie also mentioned his wife's fear of being alone with Jessica due to her menacing demeanor during a dinner they had in Australia, where a disagreement had occurred. The young widower was deeply affected as he described to the court how, at the time of losing his wife, they were preparing for their honeymoon and had anticipated possibly returning with their first child. Mirna's twin, Sandy, revealed that after her sister's death, she received an unusual message from Jessica containing an article about the alleged dangers of Vietnamese coffee, seemingly shifting the blame from the cyanide to the drink itself. Despite these statements, the strength of the prosecution's case lay in the expert testimonies and the analysis of security camera footage from Olivier's, which moved the deceased's family members to tears. It was established that the defendant arrived at the meeting with ample time to analyze the placement of the image capturing devices and determine the most advantageous location for executing her plan. The footage from these cameras clearly indicated that the defendant engaged in some form of manipulation of the beverage, a process that lasted 4 minutes. According to the staff, this intervention was unnecessary and unjustified, as the drinks had been fully prepared and ready for consumption. An additional detail revealed by the security recordings, which had not been previously disclosed, was that while waiting for her friends, Jessica was observed repeatedly scratching her hands and rubbing them against her pants. According to a forensic toxicologist, these actions could have been a reaction to itching caused by handling or exposure to cyanide. It was noted that the pants Jessica wore that day could not be examined because she had discarded them, claiming they had torn. The enhanced and enlarged video, presented in court, demonstrated the entire process from the preparation of the drinks to their service at the table. The footage showed no evidence of intervention by any restaurant staff or alteration of the liquids. Furthermore, testimonies from the restaurant manager and employees who served the young women confirmed that the drink found on the table had undeniably been contaminated. The drink's color had changed significantly, and it emitted a foul odor, prompting a thorough review of all related ingredients, which revealed no anomalies. A significant portion of the hearings was devoted to discussing the poisoning itself. A forensic specialist from the police hospital, who examined Mirna's stomach 3 days after her death, reported the presence of dark-colored spots that could only be attributed to poisoning. The forensic specialist concluded that the dark-colored spots in Mirna's stomach could only be attributed to the ingestion of a corrosive substance. Such cases are typically associated with substances like arsenic, cyanide, or sulfuric acid. However, the defense team, led by the esteemed and costly local attorney Otto Hazibuan and composed of over a dozen legal experts, introduced counter-arguments. Their toxicological experts highlighted that the detected amount of cyanide was minimal and insufficient to cause death. They also questioned why the chemical was present only in the stomach and not in any other organ of Mirna's body. They suggested that the cause of death might have been an undetected pre-existing condition or a spontaneous event such as a stroke, which could not be ruled out due to the victim's family's objections to a full autopsy. These claims presented a significant challenge to the prosecution, which struggled to refute or discredit the defense's assertions. Moreover, the prosecution failed to prove that the defendant had acquired the cyanide or that there were any eyewitnesses who had directly seen her adding the poison to the drink. In addition, one of the experts presented by the defense, Dr. B. Bengal, was deported from Indonesia after it was discovered that he had entered the country on a tourist visa rather than obtaining the proper visa for his participation in the trial. The defense also included statements from mental health experts who characterized the defendant as possessing a compulsive, narcissistic, and volatile personality. Notably, some so-called specialists attempted to support their claims using outdated theories that linked a person's character to their physical traits. Another particularly compelling testimony was that of Christy Carter, a former colleague of Jessica at the ambulance company. Although Christy was unable to attend the trial in person, the prosecutor sought and obtained permission from the judges to read her sworn statements provided to the investigative team in Australia. In her statement, Christy described Jessica as having 2 conflicting personalities. She could be kind and cheerful at times, but could rapidly become extremely angry if her desires were not met, or if she did not receive the attention and sympathy she sought. Christy noted that Jessica's behavior deteriorated significantly after her boyfriend ended their relationship. Christy also recounted an incident where Jessica had mentioned that if she ever wanted to end her life or someone else's, she would simply use poison. Christy characterized Jessica as cunning, a habitual liar who fabricated stories to get what she wanted. She likened interacting with Jessica to dealing with someone who wore a mask, being friendly with acquaintances while her true, terrifying nature emerged in close relationships or under pressure. During cross-examination, Christie was asked if she knew how Jessica could have obtained the poison. Christie admitted that she could not explain this specific detail but asserted that Jessica was adept at obtaining what she wanted. In response, Jessica claimed that 90% of Christie's testimony was false. She criticized Christie, accusing her of having fired many of Jessica's friends and being fundamentally dishonest. Jessica argued that Christie's statements, given under oath, were meaningless to her and requested that they be disregarded as they incriminated her excessively. Nonetheless, Jessica soon had to confront another witness's testimony that she found difficult to refute. The next witness was Officer John Torres from the New South Wales Police in Australia. He testified that in the months leading up to the event in question, the defendant's ex-boyfriend had been granted an urgent restraining order against her, as he had justifiable concerns for his safety. During his testimony, aided by a translator, Officer Torres read from 13 police reports from 2014 and 2015 involving Jessica. These reports documented multiple arrests related to alcohol abuse, threats to colleagues, and attempts to end her own life, often blaming others for her circumstances. In one instance, she had left a letter indicating that her boyfriend was responsible for her decision to commit suicide. The defense attorney contended that Jessica was not harassing her ex-partner, but rather trying to recover money she had lent him, which he had refused to repay. The most anticipated testimony of the trial was that of the defendant herself. This trial had become a media spectacle, with Jessica's statements being broadcast live to thousands of viewers across the country. According to available footage, Jessica remained calm throughout her testimony, occasionally appearing somewhat affected but even smiling at times. While it is impossible to summarize the entire hours of her testimony, Jessica consistently maintained her innocence regarding her friend's fatal poisoning. She denied arriving early at the meeting to scout the location and select a suitable spot for her plan. Instead, she claimed she had arrived early due to unfamiliarity with Jakarta's transportation system and intended to explore the mall. Regarding her refusal to try the coffee when Mirna offered it, Jessica explained that she simply had no desire to taste something her friend had already deemed unpleasant. She also clarified that she had paid the bill in advance as was customary in Australia. Throughout her testimony, she spoke with calmness and clarity. Jessica asserted that she had no intention of concealing anything by disposing of the pants she wore on the day of the incident. She justified not having them repaired by stating that she had many other clothing items. She vehemently denied putting cyanide in her friend's drink. When asked by one of the judges how she felt about her friend's death, Jessica expressed deep sadness, confusion, and a sense of being lost, but stated she could not fully mourn because she was being unjustly blamed. During the hearings, Jessica read several texts she had written to reaffirm her innocence and convey her feelings of being cornered and unfairly judged by the public. She claimed that her happiness had been stripped away the moment she was sent to an overcrowded prison. She also noted that her family was suffering, but despite her depression and anger, she would not admit to a crime she did not commit. She concluded her statement by urging the judges to base their decision on evidence rather than speculation. After nearly 5 months of extensive hearings, which were followed by much of the nation via live broadcasts, the day of the judge's decision finally arrived on October 27, 2016. The courtroom, with its limited seating, was packed with hundreds of people who had lined up since early morning, including visitors from other Indonesian islands who had traveled specifically to witness the verdict. Outside the courtroom, where monitors were set up to accommodate the overflow of spectators, crowds gathered. The scene was tightly secured by approximately 500 police officers who were on high alert for any potential disturbances. The judges deliberated whether Jessica's anger might have been triggered by Mirna's criticism of her then partner and the strong advice Mirna had given him to end the relationship. In the reading of a verdict spanning over 370 pages, the magistrates asserted that the defendant's behavior at the scene on the day of the incident was extremely suspicious, and all of her actions demonstrated a level of premeditation as well as acting in a vile and ruthless manner. After presenting these arguments, the trio of judges found Jessica Kumala Wongso guilty of the premeditated murder of Mirna Salihin and sentenced her to 20 years in prison. Immediately following the verdict, Otto Hasibuan, Jessica's lawyer, announced that he would appeal the decision, which he deemed unjust and biased. The defendant stated that she did not accept the verdict and considered the sentence to be unfair and prejudiced. Mirna's family members, while pleased with the guilty verdict, made it clear that they would never be fully satisfied, as no punishment could ever bring Mirna back. The decision was first appealed to the Jakarta High Court, which denied the appeal. Following this setback, the defense appealed to the Supreme Court, which also rejected the appeal. As of the latest information from the second half of 2023, Jessica was being held in the women's prison at Pondok Bambu, East Jakarta, and continues to maintain her innocence regarding the heinous crime that the press dubbed the cyanide coffee case. However, despite everything that has happened, there is a possibility that this may not be the end of the story. In mid-October 2023, Otto Hasibuan, Jessica's lawyer, reported that a judicial review of the case was being prepared, stating that he had new evidence. The prosecution assured that it was ready to face any appeals filed by Jessica's legal team. Additionally, Jessica's legal team reported that they had lodged a complaint against one of the judges in the case with the Judicial Commission and the Supreme Court's oversight body for allegedly committing an ethics violation by making the case public while it was still in progress. As of December 1, 2023, there were reports of a significant development in the case. A large meeting of lawyers from a group known as Jessica Wongso's Defense Alliance denounced Mirna's father to the National Police Headquarters in South Jakarta, alleging that he had made the footage from one of the cafe's security cameras disappear. The accusation appeared to be based on a statement made by the victim's father during a television interview, in which he claimed to have on his mobile phone images from one of the security cameras that purportedly showed Jessica pouring cyanide into Mirna's drink, an image that never surfaced during the trial. While we await a definitive resolution to this case, we would like to highlight some striking facts that emerged from this controversial judicial process. According to media analysts, the live broadcasts of the entire trial, conducted by some channels, led to a shift in public opinion. Many people who initially blamed the defendant began to support her on social media and called for her release. These particularities led to the creation of a Netflix streaming documentary titled Ice Coffee Murder Jessica Wongso, which premiered in September 2023. There was also a special segment about the crime on the investigative show 60 Minutes. One of the many striking facts highlighted in a New York Times article was that, rather than driving away customers, the scandal surrounding Olivier's Cafe restaurant transformed it into a tourist attraction. This increase in visitors has significantly boosted the number of people frequenting the cafe. Many of these visitors request permission to sit at the table where the events occurred and do not miss the opportunity to take photographs. Additionally, the number of orders for the Vietnamese iced coffee, which everyone now wants to try, has also surged. The development of this case has left behind many unanswered questions and undoubtedly a trail of wounds that are very difficult to heal for the families and loved ones of the two young women at the heart of the event. One thing, however, seems very clear: human relationships are incredibly complex, and both friendship and trust are as invaluable as they are fragile. What often appears to be the perfect lives of those around us can conceal secrets or hidden emotions that, when revealed, can lead to dire consequences. Well, dear audience, that concludes another investigation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's case. Your opinions are very important to us, so please share them with respect for the victim, as well as for other viewers and us as we read your comments. Before you leave, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to share this video if you think someone you know might be interested in it.